The many hundreds of people.
9 names are leaking out. The 9 most powerful men who ever walked through Jeffrey Epstein's door and were behind it. This is cold, direct testimony from Ghislaine Maxwell, the person who ultimately held the keys to the entire network. Before her arrest, she named them. No explanation, no remorse, just a list. And one by one, like a bombshell, the world was stunned. A former president, a prince, billionaires and politicians. They weren't just guests. They were the system that had kept Epstein company for 2 decades. And now the veil of mystery has begun to lift. 1. Bill Clinton, mysterious connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Of all the names that have been associated with Jeffrey Epstein's network, none has attracted as much attention as Bill Clinton. He was the 42nd president of the United States and the head of one of the world's largest nonprofits, the Clinton Foundation, once a symbol of post-White House influence. Yet the Clinton-Epstein connection, while never conclusively proven, leaves many unanswered questions. Clinton's relationship with Epstein became widely known after the release of logs from Epstein's private jet, the Lolita Express. According to flight records published by Gawker and Fox News, Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's private jet at least 26 times between 2001 and 2003. Some of the trips included Clinton flying without Secret Service agents, a rarity for the former president. For example, in February 2002, Clinton and Clinton Foundation staff flew from Miami to Africa, with Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and several other passengers. They were reportedly involved in HIV/AIDS relief efforts in Rwanda, Nigeria, and Ghana. But that raises questions. Why would a former president need to use the private jet of a financier who has been implicated in numerous scandals? And why are some trips not fully documented with Secret Service agents? Clinton immediately denied the allegations. In a 2019 statement through his spokesman, he said President Clinton had no knowledge of the horrific crimes committed by Jeffrey Epstein. The statement also asserted that Clinton had only visited Epstein's New York residence, once had never been to his private Caribbean island, and had had no contact with Epstein after 2003. Many people close to Clinton also described the relationship as political courtesy, that Epstein was a potential donor to global initiatives, especially related to education and public health. But there are still details that make it difficult for the public to dismiss suspicions. One of them is the rather close relationship between Clinton and Ghislaine Maxwell. The woman was once considered Epstein's manager. She once appeared at an event organized by Chelsea Clinton, and some old photos show that she was close to Clinton's inner circle. However, to this point, there is no legal evidence to suggest that Clinton was involved in the wrongdoings that Epstein and Maxwell are accused of. All allegations remain at the level of suspicion and have not been formally concluded. Bill Clinton remains one of the most influential ex-presidents in the post-presidency era. Clinton is also a sought-after speaker with a speaking fee that can reach $200,000 to $500,000. Bill Clinton's net worth is estimated by Forbes and Celebrity Net Worth to be between $80 million and $120 million, largely from his book speaking engagements and post-political activism. Together with his wife Hillary Clinton, he has built a political and social brand that is unlikely to be replaced in the 21st century. The next name Maxwell mentioned created a real earthquake in the hearts of the British royal family. 2. Prince Andrew, royal family and Epstein's shadow. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, the third son of Queen Elizabeth II, was once seen as one of the faces of change in the royal family. In the early 2000s, he was known for his role as a trade envoy for the UK, traveling the globe to promote trade. It was during this time that his relationship with Epstein first emerged. FBI documents show that Prince Andrew had numerous interactions with Epstein, including a documented visit to Epstein's Manhattan mansion in 2010. That was after Epstein had been convicted of a felony. Photos of him walking in Central Park with Epstein soon after sparked controversy. Not only that Andrew's name appeared on the flight log, the passenger list on Epstein's private plane, at least 4 times. One of the flights in question was from Teterboro, New Jersey to the Bahamas in 1999 with Ghislaine Maxwell on board. However, he insisted that the travel had no negative connotations and that it was mostly for social gatherings or public events, many of which involved other high-profile figures. Most notably, Virginia Giuffre has testified that she was introduced to Prince Andrew, aged just 17, in the context of her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. A famous photograph of Andrew with his hand on the young woman's waist, with Ghislaine Maxwell standing behind him, has been a focus of the hearings. However, Prince Andrew has strenuously denied all allegations. In a 2019 interview with BBC Newsnight, he insisted he had never met Giuffre and even suggested that the photo could have been faked. In the same Newsnight interview, Andrew stressed that his relationship with Epstein was not particularly close. He admitted to staying at Epstein's home a few times, but said it was for work or social reasons. "I never saw anything unusual," he added. However, his failure to keep his distance after the 2008 incident remains controversial. The interview, instead of quelling doubts, caused a stir in public opinion. The negative reaction from the media and the public forced the British royal family to take quick action. Just days later, Andrew announced he was stepping back from royal duties for the foreseeable future and has since largely disappeared from public view. In 2022, he reached an out-of-court settlement with Giuffre reportedly worth more than $12 million. But it did not include any admission of guilt. Prince Andrew once held a significant position in the British royal family. In addition to his official role, he also had influence over many charities, the military and foundations affiliated with the royal family. However, since the Epstein scandal, most of these organizations have cut ties with him. As for his wealth, much of Andrew's wealth is not publicly known as he is not required to declare his assets. However, observers estimate his net worth to be between $5 million and $10 million. Much of it comes from royal grants, investments, and inheritances. Following the Giuffre settlement, it was reported that the Queen provided some financial support to protect the royal family's reputation. Prince Andrew is one of the figures who exemplifies the complexity of the network that surrounded Epstein. Fame, power, and silence became strong walls of protection. But when the walls were broken, the once untouchable names became the focus of international scrutiny. The next name that confused the public the most, a person who was once proud to be a friend, but later stepped back in silence. 3. Donald Trump. One-time friend to forever silent person in the dark. Epstein, Donald Trump, real estate businessman, reality TV host, and later the 45th President of the United States, spent years as a close friend of Epstein and Palm Beach's elite. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were more than just two wealthy men photographed together at lavish parties. There was a public intimacy between them, at least initially. Trump called Epstein a wonderful guy, who liked beautiful women as much as I did in a 2002 interview with New York Magazine. Epstein was still a figure of curiosity in the upper echelons of society, and their relationship was a tacit agreement between two worlds of power, real estate, and finance. Epstein was invited to Mar-a-Lago, Trump's luxury resort in Florida. According to former witnesses and documents unsealed in court, Trump and Epstein may have attended private events together with a select guest list. However, there is no legal evidence that Trump was directly involved in Epstein's illegal activities. In fact, after Epstein was first convicted in 2007, Donald Trump almost completely cut ties. According to Bradley Edwards, a lawyer who represents many of Epstein's victims, Trump was the only one of those called who actively cooperated with the investigation. However, the ambiguity of their initial relationship still leaves many questions. Some unsealed court documents show that Epstein once had a phone book with the names and contact information of Trump and many of his close associates. Among the allegations that have made headlines, one testimony from 2016 has been particularly eye-catching. An anonymous woman through a lawsuit filed in California federal court said she attended a party in 1994 that included both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. She said she engaged in unwanted behavior in the context of the party. However, the case was withdrawn just before the presidential election and never went to trial, leaving the information surrounding it still controversial. Trump's side has completely denied all allegations, and no concrete evidence has been presented. Those around him have always emphasized Trump had no connection to Epstein's wrongdoings, and even disowned him early on. When Epstein was arrested in 2019, Donald Trump, then President of the United States, issued a brief statement. "I know him, as do many people in Palm Beach. We haven't spoken in 15 years. I'm not a fan of him." The quote, which came from a press conference after Epstein was charged, was widely quoted by major news outlets including Reuters and Business Insider. It was seen as a final break, as a way to distance his political image from the ripples of his past. While the Trump-Epstein connection has never been legally confirmed, the fact that the two were friends and shared many social connections has kept Trump's name in discussions of Epstein's orbit of power. The relationship, though now frosty, remains an integral part of the larger picture of those who once stood close to that dark center. Next up is a name that will shock everyone. 4. Les Wexner, Epstein's mysterious financial patron. If Jeffrey Epstein was a powerful pawn in the American elite, then Les Wexner was the hand that supported and protected that pawn during the early years. Unlike the characters who only passed through Epstein's life with parties or social relationships, Wexner, the founder of the L Brands empire. The corporation that owns Victoria's Secret was the one who gave Epstein financial power housing and a prestigious cover to penetrate deep into the super-rich. The relationship began in the late 1980s. Epstein was not yet a household name, but he quickly impressed Wexner with his social skills and his ability to manage assets without any formal qualifications. Within a decade, Wexner not only gave Epstein control of much of his personal wealth, but also transferred him a lavish Manhattan mansion worth tens of millions of dollars, which would become one of the key locations in the abuse allegations. From the outside, the relationship was curious because of its mismatch. Wexner, a notoriously private, disciplined billionaire who ran a women's clothing line, had placed his trust in a single man, without formal financial credentials, with a murky past. That trust lasted for years, despite Epstein's lack of public disclosure of his investments, and the fact that none other than Wexner appeared to be his client. When Epstein was arrested in 2019, questions immediately turned to Les Wexner. Did he know? Did he turn a blind eye? Was he himself the victim of a manipulator? In a letter to L Brands employees that year, Wexner claimed he had cut ties with Epstein in 2007, shortly after he was first investigated. Wexner also said he felt deeply betrayed and deceived, and admitted that Epstein had embezzled approximately $46 million from his family trusts. But that explanation doesn't completely quell suspicion. Despite saying he had cut ties in 2007, Epstein still owned his Manhattan home until his arrest, and he used his Wexner-backed reputation to expand his network. Legal documents also show that Epstein was involved in casting Victoria's Secret models, something Wexner has categorically denied. Les Wexner's public image has been severely damaged. In 2020, he announced his resignation from the L Brands board of directors, closing a controversial chapter in his career. With an estimated fortune of more than $4 billion according to Forbes, Les Wexner still retains his billionaire status. But the price of his association with Epstein is a stain that is not easy to erase, especially when many victims allege that Epstein's backing by figures like Wexner has caused them to be hurt in silence for many years. Although he has never been prosecuted or criminally investigated, Les Wexner remains the name that is most closely associated with the Epstein case. Without the rich and powerful people behind him, would Jeffrey Epstein have been able to become a symbol of crime covered up by fame and money? Number 5 on the list is a name no one would expect. 5. Alan Dershowitz, lawyer of power and accusation. Of all the people deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein, none has been more divisive than Alan Dershowitz. He is a renowned professor at Harvard Law School, legal advisor to multiple presidents, and an advocate for notorious figures from O.J. Simpson to Donald Trump. But to Epstein, Dershowitz was more than just a lawyer. He was a witness, a defendant, and a living symbol of the enduring debate between legal power and public morality. Dershowitz met Epstein in the late 1990s, when the financial and academic elites began to see Epstein as an intellectual philanthropist. The two became fast friends discussing philosophy and science. But when Epstein was investigated in 2005 for misconduct, Dershowitz immediately became a central part of the case, as the lead lawyer negotiating the most controversial immunity deal in American legal history. In 2008, Epstein was sentenced to just 13 months in prison with the condition that he work almost full-time, thanks to a secret deal with federal prosecutors. Alan Dershowitz was involved in the negotiations and once proudly declared that he had reached the best settlement of my legal career. But the price of that success was relentless criticism from the public, the media, and especially Epstein's victims. Years later, his name appeared in shocking legal documents filed by Virginia Giuffre, one of the main victims. She alleged that Dershowitz himself had engaged in illegal conduct when she was 17, orchestrated by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Dershowitz immediately fired back, calling Giuffre a liar and claiming that he had never been alone with any woman other than his wife. He even sued Giuffre and her lawyer David Boies to protect his reputation. However, public opinion was not easy on his side. A rich, famous man who knew every loophole of the law was close to Epstein. This could not be helped. The photos taken together, the times they flew together on the Lolita Express, the notes in Epstein's notebooks, with his name on them. All of this added up to the image of a lawyer trapped in a maze of his own making. By 2022, the legal battle between Dershowitz and Giuffre ended with a joint statement admitting no wrongdoing. Giuffre withdrew the accusations, saying it may have been a mistake. But the public was not quick to forget. Many believed the case was settled behind the scenes, while others saw it as proof that the rich and powerful always find a way to escape punishment with good lawyers. Alan Dershowitz's fortune is not publicly known, but with more than 40 years of teaching at Harvard, millions of dollars in books, legal advice, and television contracts, he is a wealthy man. What he has more than money is his voice, and he uses it to appear on television, write books, to refute the allegations, and even speak out in defense of not judging people based on their relationship with Epstein. The problem is when that voice is too loud, too confident, and too familiar with power, the public begins to wonder what it is hiding. In Epstein's world, where the law often bends to the tycoon, Alan Dershowitz embodies the most haunting question: how much of the truth has been distorted by minds that know how to bend the law to the last possible moment? Next is an equally mysterious name. 6. Glenn Dubin, a seemingly harmless relationship. When the name of Glenn Dubin, the Swedish-born billionaire investor associated with the hedge fund Highbridge Capital Management, was mentioned in documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, many in the financial world were surprised. Unlike the cold image of Wall Street tycoons, Dubin has long been known as a private person, a cautious investor, and involved in medical charity activities. However, it was his personal relationship with Epstein that attracted public attention. Glenn Dubin and his wife, Dr. Eva Anderson, have known Epstein since the 1990s. In fact, Eva had a romantic relationship with Epstein before marrying Dubin. Although Eva and Epstein later became friends, their bond never faded. Epstein was invited to many Dubin family events even after he was released from prison in 2009. At that time, Epstein was even invited to dinner at Dubin's Manhattan home, a detail revealed in investigative documents in 2019. Their long-standing closeness has raised questions. In a document released by the U.S. Attorney's Office, one of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre, testified that she was introduced to Dubin. However, Glenn Dubin has denied the allegations, and no criminal charges have been brought against him. The Dubin family has said their relationship with Epstein was purely social and clearly defined. In an official response, Glenn Dubin's attorney asserted that he has never engaged in inappropriate conduct with any woman or minor, and that the allegations are completely false. However, the continued closeness between Dubin and Epstein, especially after Epstein's conviction, has led many observers to question the ethical boundaries within the financial elite. Highbridge, a firm founded by Dubin, received a significant investment from Epstein in 2004. The investment was later acquired by J.P. Morgan, but Epstein's role as introducer to the deal is still mentioned in many analyses. Outside of the scandal, Glenn Dubin is one of the most successful investors in the hedge fund industry. With a personal fortune estimated at more than $2 billion, he and his wife have donated tens of millions of dollars to cancer research programs and are the founders of the Dubin Breast Center at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, where Eva Dubin was treated. But since 2019, Glenn Dubin has largely disappeared from the financial press. He has withdrawn from investing, resigned from several boards, and kept a low profile. Such discretion is a common choice in the upper echelons of the business world, where reputation can sometimes be worth more than profits. Glenn Dubin has not been charged with a crime, nor has any indictment been filed against him. But the question remains, could his association with someone like Jeffrey Epstein for 2 decades have been truly accidental? As the line between social contact and silent complicity becomes increasingly blurred, the silence of people like Dubin leaves a void that is difficult to fill. The next name will reveal a horrifying truth. 7. Leon Black. A financial network and unanswered questions. As the spotlight of investigation has focused on the complex web surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, Leon Black, the co-founder and former CEO of Apollo Global Management, has quickly become one of the most notable figures. With a financial empire worth tens of billions of dollars, Leon Black has long been one of the most powerful men on Wall Street. But his personal and financial ties to Epstein have raised questions. Where does the line between consulting and personal influence blur? According to an internal investigation conducted by the law firm deceive at the request of Apollo's board of directors, Leon Black paid Epstein more than $158 million between 2012 and 2017, an unusually large sum for the financial and tax advice Epstein was supposed to provide. More importantly, the payments occurred years after Epstein was convicted in 2008, which led many in the financial world to distance themselves from him. In a public statement, Black admitted that he made a mistake in continuing his professional relationship with Epstein, and insisted that he was not involved in any wrongdoing. However, criticism has grown, especially after the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal simultaneously revealed financial transactions between the two, as well as several private meetings that took place at Epstein's Manhattan home. One of the most notable details is the connection between Epstein and Black's family foundation, Elysium Management. Epstein reportedly provided Leon Black with complex wealth management strategies, trust structures, and tax planning, including work on charitable donations and cross-border investments. While the payments were reportedly legal, the lack of transparency and Black's choice to continue cooperating after Epstein's scandal has severely damaged his reputation. Under pressure from shareholders and the public, Leon Black announced his departure as chairman and CEO of Apollo in 2021, although he insisted that the decision was for personal reasons and that he wanted to spend time with his family. However, the press continued to delve into the complexities of his dealings with Epstein. In particular, Epstein's role in Black's philanthropic activities and real estate, such as the luxury mansion on Fifth Avenue, where Epstein was seen entering and leaving. In an official statement in 2021, Black said, "I deeply regret my involvement with Epstein. It was a mistake I will live with for the rest of my life." However, to the public, that apology was not enough to erase the shadow that the relationship left. By the time he left, Apollo Leon Black was worth an estimated $8 billion, largely from his Apollo stake and private investments. Despite stepping down from his executive role, he remains one of the most influential figures in global finance. The Leon Black story is a prime example of how reputations can be tarnished not by direct actions, but by decisions involving who we choose to trust, especially when that person is Jeffrey Epstein, right after the name Leon Black. Another face on the list of people who had connections with Jeffrey Epstein has raised eyebrows. 8. Ehud Barak, the veteran general and the hard-to-erase Epstein shadow. A former prime minister of Israel and one of the most accomplished generals in the country's history, Barak entered politics with a winning streak and a solid reputation. But after Epstein's arrest and the release of investigative documents, his name suddenly appeared in a web of questionable connections. Moving on from the financial scandals on Wall Street, the relationship between Barak and Epstein is different. It is not entirely based on commercial interests, but rather on investment partnerships and secret meetings. Documents show that Barak received millions of dollars from a company associated with Epstein, including a payment of more than $2 million from Epstein's company WCF in 2015. Barak claims it was an investment for a technology security company he founded, but the extent of his involvement and the reasons for choosing Epstein as a partner remain unclear. A photo that made headlines. Barak was photographed entering one of Epstein's New York properties in 2016. When asked about it, he admitted that he had met Epstein many times, including at his Manhattan home. But he insisted that he had no knowledge of any wrongdoing and had not witnessed anything unusual. Barak also said that at the time of the meeting, he believed Epstein had paid for his mistakes, referring to Epstein's 2008 conviction in Florida. In terms of power and wealth, Ehud Barak is one of the richest politicians in Israel. After leaving politics, he actively participated in the investment and technology sectors, owning assets worth tens of millions of dollars. He also cooperated with many international corporations as an advisor and strategic investor. This makes the relationship with Epstein, a man with a long history of finance and crime, even more remarkable. Ehud Barak has so far denied any wrongdoing, But the question remains. As someone who once held a top national security position, was he truly ignorant of Epstein's actions? In the complex picture of Epstein's network, Barack's presence is more than a minor detail. It raises larger questions about silence choice and accountability in the international power elite. The last name on the list makes everyone stunned. 9. Bill Gates and his controversial connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft and one of the world's most influential billionaires, is widely known for his philanthropy through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He has spent tens of billions of dollars fighting disease poverty and promoting global education. However, Gates' past relationship with convicted felon Jeffrey Epstein has raised questions and criticism about his transparency about his social relationships. According to documents and testimony released after Epstein's second arrest in 2019, Bill Gates met with Epstein at least a few times, between 2011 and 2013 after Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008. The New York Times reported that Gates visited Epstein's Manhattan home and attended several meetings, sometimes lasting hours, in which Epstein proposed ideas to help Gates coordinate his philanthropy or access some form of non-traditional funding. What surprised the public was that Bill Gates, a man known for his careful handling of both his professional and personal relationships, would agree to meet with a convicted felon like Epstein, and more than once. While there is no evidence that Gates was directly involved in any wrongdoing by Epstein, the connection has raised unavoidable questions from the public and the media. As more information leaked, Gates spoke out. In a 2021 interview with PBS NewsHour, he admitted to meeting Epstein, calling it a big mistake. When asked why he continued to meet Epstein after the first time, Gates said only that he thought he could learn something about philanthropy. But it didn't happen. Melinda French Gates. Bill Gates' ex-wife was reportedly unhappy with her husband's meetings with Epstein. According to U.S. media, Melinda met Epstein once and immediately warned Bill to end all contact. A few months after information about Epstein was widely revealed, the couple announced their divorce. A shocking decision, but it is not confirmed was directly related to the incident. In terms of wealth and power, Bill Gates remains one of the richest people in the world, with an estimated fortune of more than $130 billion to 2025. The Gates Foundation also remains a major player in many global public health programs. However, the Epstein affair has tarnished his image, at least in the eyes of some of the public. Gates's appearance on the Jeffrey Epstein contact list is not an accusation. It is a reminder that even the most influential and powerful people are not immune to making mistakes when it comes to choosing their friends. And in an age when reputations can be shaken by a name that is tainted by scandal, small choices in the past can sometimes become big questions for the future. Which character on this list surprised you the most? Comment below.